A few miles east of Henderson, and just south of the Indiana border, lies the town of Spottsville, Kentucky. It's a small rural town with a population of 325 people, mostly wooded, and described by many as a friendly place. It seems no different than any other of the small towns in northern Kentucky. But in the 1970s things started happening in the rural community that took a terrifying turn. Several people in the area started observing a creature so unsettling, that several families reportedly even moved away from the area. Reports of this creature date back to the 1890s, when one was reportedly shot not far from there by a group of men. In February 1975, on a farmhouse on Mound Ridge Road, the Nunnally family, after several years of living in the city, they decided to relocate there. Happy to return to the peace and simplicity of country living, the Nunnally family ignored the warnings given to them by the residents of the area, including the former resident of the house, who said he had fired several rifle shots through the back screen door at a large hairy figure, who was standing just outside looking in at him. This giant and hairy red-eyed creature would become known as the Spottsville Monster. Not listening to the warnings, the Nunnally family moved into the small isolated farmhouse, very close to the banks of the Green River. The family consisted of the father, who they called Red, the mother, and 6 young children. They were a simple typical country family. At first things were normal, then in the spring they noticed a steady disappearance of their chickens, which was attributed to weasels and other animals. Then the older boys, aged 9 and 10, began to find the carcasses of dead dogs in the fields. The bodies of the dogs were strangely mutilated, being sliced from top to bottom with all the internal organs removed, including the eyes and tongues. The father was a tough and intelligent man, the kind who was not easily scared by anything. He thought a 12-gauge shotgun would take care of any problems that he might encounter. By this time they already had several encounters with what the children called the Brown Man. By January 1976, the family had lost a total of over 200 chickens, 1 goat, and a horse, and also would find the remains of 8 dogs, a pig, and a goat. All were mutilated. Shortly after, a man came walking from the tree line across one of the fields. He was holding a shotgun, and walking towards the house. The man introduced himself as a neighbor, who lived less than a half-mile up the road. He stated that he had just been squirrel hunting in the nearby woods and had seen something big and hairy that ran away. It was heading in the direction of the Nunnally house, and he didn't know what it was, or how dangerous it might be. He felt it was his duty to come warn the family about it. The first sighting by the Nunnallys of the creature happened at 8 o'clock one evening, when Rose stepped onto the front porch to call her family for dinner. She looked to her left, and saw a giant hairy shadow, at least 8 feet tall, standing in the darkness by a nearby shed. It was looking directly at her. She screamed, then ran back inside the house and locked the door. Her oldest son rushed over holding his rifle. Red grabbed his shotgun. Rose quickly called the police. But after looking around the area outside the house and finding nothing, the state police left. But they would be called back several more times as the visits became nightly events by the creature. Eventually it was later learned that similar sightings were taking place all along the river, in towns such as Bluff City and Hebbardsville. Finally the police refused to respond to any more monster calls, and the family was left to fend for themselves. Rose saw it again one evening as it ran from a field and jumped a fence. Dean, who was only 10, was standing in the front yard one day, when he heard a loud crashing sound through the trees. He looked up and saw the creature standing by an old tobacco truck. The rails of the truck were 8 feet tall and the creature's head stood above it. He described it as being huge and tall, with a square jaw, and had small closed-set eyes. It was covered in reddish-gray hair that was thin. One day, all of the children saw the creature standing in a cornfield. It towered above the full-grown corn, and seemed to sway from side to side as it stood there. Soon the local TV news had heard of the events from the police reports, and sent a camera crew and police sketch artist out to the farm. The artist drew the hairy creature, and a news segment about the family was featured on the evening news. The following day, a group of reporters from the local newspaper showed up at the Nunnally farm to get the story firsthand. The morning edition of the Henderson newspaper gave the creature the name the Spottsville Monster. The after effects of this sent groups of armed hunters to the Spottsville area, all looking for the creature. The neighbor from down the road who had previously warned them, agreed to try and track the creature down for the sake of the safety of the family. He claimed he encountered it one day at an old abandoned farmhouse deep in the woods. He said it was looking out the window at him. The man fired at it, then he said it vanished before his eyes. Determined to find it, he claimed to have found evidence of hair, a claw, and also made a plaster cast of a partial footprint found in a patch of frozen ground. The print, even though incomplete, showed a very clear impression left by a large four-toed foot. When the news reporters returned and wrote more stories, the neighbor, who was a fireman, suffered intense public ridicule. The children were repeatedly harassed at school also. The events finally came to an end, at least for the neighbor. He told Mr. Nunnally about an encounter with the creature he had experienced a couple of weeks before. He had been looking for the creature one day, when it started to rain. He saw an abandoned old barn that he went into it seeking shelter from the storm. He quickly found out the creature was also inside. Once in the barn, he slowly turned around and found himself staring at the creature. He said, it was horrible, and deeply terrifying, with a short muzzle-like mouth, long pointed fangs in both its upper and lower jaws, black skin and bright red eyes. He reached for the rifle he had strapped on his shoulder, but suddenly found himself unable to move as the creature's eyes froze him in their gaze. Despite the beast's appearance, he claimed it spoke to him without moving its mouth, almost like a form of mental telepathy, and said, "Don't be afraid. I will not harm you." Then it turned around and ran out. Upon hearing his story, Red asked the man if he thought it might one night try to steal one of the children. The neighbor said that he thought it was not likely, because it had been here for nearly a year already, and the creature seemed to be satisfied with killing animals, and merely scaring the people. But, he also said, if the creature ever did decide to do that, there would be nothing anyone could do to stop it. For weeks Red had kept a 5-gallon bucket of kerosene near the kitchen door, in case the creature tried to get in and attack the members of the household. He said that if it got in and he could not stop it with bullets, it was his intention of kicking the bucket of fuel over and setting it ablaze, burning the house to the ground with his whole family inside, rather than losing one or more of them to the creature. Soon afterwards, Red and Rose and their children moved back to the city. It has been over 45 years since it happened, and there have been hundreds of reports of people claiming to have seen the creature since then. Please tell us what you think about the Spottsville Monster in the comments below. Also, please like and subscribe.